Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. We are, as you can see, on the road. I am down in Miami. We were just getting ready. I'll be speaking today at Charlie Ward's event, which I'm excited about. A great event. He's a good guy. Charlie's a really good dude. If you ever get the opportunity to sit and talk with him, and he's a very approachable guy. So you ever get the opportunity to chat with him, he is a really, really interesting and good character. So looking forward to that. And while I was down here, of course, I ran into one of my best friends in the whole world, and that's Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. And I'm proud to say that, yeah, Sherri and I are actually real friends. We're friends even outside of work. She needs something, she can call me anytime, and same. And we lean on each other. We're just a legitimate good friendship, and it's one of the great things that's really kind of came out of the work I do. So I'm excited. She's going to be on here today. She's got a new show. I'm sorry, a new book, and it's very important. It's really critical that we look at. Sherri is continuing to lead in the fight for health freedom, to expose the truth about vaccines and all the medical tyranny and the corruption in big pharma. She's continuing to fight. I mean, but she's OG, right? Before Bobby, before me, before any of us, Sherri was doing this, right? Uh, she, much like NHF, is just one of the longest standing warriors in this space. And for anybody that's grateful that we don't have vaccine mandates and continued lockdowns, make sure you send Sherri a great big thank you, because honestly, she is part of the reason, a major part. I mean, none of the work that guys like me did could have been done without all the years of research and background that she had already for us. So, and in fact, actually, Sherri was an expert on on my very first COVID case, uh, which I couldn't have done without her. But it was a monumental case, and she didn't charge me, she didn't do anything. She just helped, because that's the kind of person she is. So. Very grateful to call her a friend. I can't sing her praises enough, and I'm glad that we're going to be talking to her in just a second here. Before I do, we got some other things that we passed this GWF Global Wellness Forum. We were able to, has done a lot of work, and I'm affiliated. I'm working with them. I help them on the legal side here and there, and do some advice and that sort of stuff now and again. And they are a wonderful group of people. Marlon Maples, Ed Group, and Sayer G are leading it, but there are a ton of good people on the boards and on the various parts of this. Just wonderful people I've been inviting. One of the first projects we really came onto was pushing on this chemtrail stuff. And I'm proud to say that GWF, and I'd like to think I helped a little bit, but they did most of the heavy lifting. Amy McBride does a wonderful job there. Was able to get this bill passed in Florida about chemtrails, and it's a really important thing. I've been watching, and it's interesting to me, and it kind of irks me, because I see some of these naysayers. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's not going to stop the feds. It's not going to do this. It's not going to do that. And it's interesting, because the people who like to throw rocks are supposed to be on our side, first of all, and second of all, haven't done a damn thing. Not one thing. They don't do anything. They can complain about what other people are doing, but they aren't doing anything. It's a very frustrating thing to me, because on the patriot side, the freedom side of things, we tend to form these circular firing squads, and it's completely unnecessary. I don't know why we do this. I don't know why we snipe at each other, rather than saying, hey, listen, we understand that you have federal preemption, but this bill is important because it's going to stop state level actors. It's going to allow certain private companies to be held accountable where there's evidence. There's a lot of things that this can do to stop the chemtrails and the pollution and the stuff that's happening in our skies. Is it going to shut down the contrails that we see, or the chemtrails that we see behind jets? No, absolutely not. They've reformulated jet fuel. We know that. We know that the reformulated jet fuel is a disaster. We know that it's creating all sorts of issues. And, that stuff isn't going to be shut down, because that is federal. We also do know, Bobby even admitted, we got, and you want to know how successful this was. Even Bobby Kennedy, a few months ago, everybody said chemtrails were a conspiracy theory. Now we have the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Bobby Kennedy, out there admitting that there is a chemtrail program being ran by DARPA and the DOD, and it's a deep state program. So, I mean, we have the truth out there now. You want to talk about success? This was wildly successful. And that would never have happened without a credible push for actual legislation to be passed. So for anyone out there saying, well, federal preemption, by the way, most of those people aren't lawyers and don't know what they can actually do with the law. In fact, I know some of them, and they don't know their rear end from a hole in the ground. Yeah, it's an absurd thing. There is a lot that this bill does, including bringing credibility and transparency to this whole conversation, including, there's been some wonderful people. I've talked to some experts in geoengineering and this whole thing who've been at this for years. They're amazing people. They're brilliant people, but they have had zero traction, zero credibility in this. It's just gone nowhere. This brought credibility to the conversation. And now with HHS recognizing and some of these other people recognizing what's happening, this is now a legitimate thing. We can now talk about chemtrails, contrails, the stuff being sprayed in our skies, however you want to refer to it, in a credible way. It's now a real thing. So you want to know you want to talk about success? That's success. That is success, because now we can have a real conversation about what they're doing to pollute our skies, who's doing it, why it's happening, and why we're allowing it. That is a huge success. Congratulations, GWF. Congratulations, Amy, Sayer, Ed, Marla. Congratulations to all the people in Florida who stood behind this, and there's a whole bunch of them. I think Jim Lee has been pretty instrumental in some of this. A shout out to everybody who's been part of this, and I'm grateful for all of them. All right. I want to get Sherri on here. You don't want me to ramble forever, but before I do, I want to remind you, please support us. GiveSendGo.com/Renslaw. GiveSendGo.com/Renslaw. Become a monthly supporter. Your monthly support keeps us going, keeps us fighting. We need your help. We need your support. So please, whatever you can do, please continue helping us. Also, go to TomRenz.com, www.TomRenz.com. You can't get there unless you type TomRenz.com. You can't Google this because I am censored. Google hates me because I'm a truth teller. Google doesn't like the truth. So go to TomRenz.com. And if you scroll down on TomRenz.com, you go to the shop and then affiliates, you'll see that Sherri is one of our partners, and she's got some of the best courses in the business online. You sign up for her courses, you can learn from the OG there. So it's some of the best stuff online. I'll ask her about that. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But make sure you're supporting Sherri. Make sure you're supporting us at TomRenz.com. And thank you very much for all of that. Okay, without further ado, I'll get my ugly mug off of half of the screen and let you guys see the person that you actually want to see. So here we go. Sherri, how are you this morning?
I'm great, Tom. Good to see you. Good to run into you down here in Miami at Charlie Ward's great course. There's a lot of good people here. It's really, really good.
There are, and there's people that I didn't know. I mean, like, I know a lot of people, but there have been some people here that I've never met before. So
same.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting, and that's kind of neat because a lot of these events are kind of the same people, but this one was actually a little bit different. So, I think that's pretty cool, and I'm excited about that. So, so how are you doing, Sherri? You got a brand shiny new book out, and I think it's shiny. I'm not sure.
It is shiny.
Well, there you go. Brand shiny new book out, and I would love you to tell everybody a little bit about that.
Well, I'll start out by showing a picture. This is the cover of the book, and the title of the book is Zero Accountability in a Failed System. Zero accountability. Just remember those two words. Zero accountability. How big pharma weaponizes vaccines, public health, and the law. And so it turned out to be a bigger book. Excuse me, a bigger book than I thought it was going to be because I put so much material in there, and I crammed in all sorts of things that we don't generally talk about in the health freedom movement. So it gave me a platform to not only talk about the bird flu from 2005 to the bird flu scam-demic they tried to start again in 2023 and compare and contrast the two of what they're doing. Also got to talk about, how flu shots are actually made, when they started putting adjuvants and why into flu shots, how completely ineffective flu shots are and have been for the last 20 years.
Awful.
All of the adjuvants, the two different adjuvant systems that they decided to inject in us. Aluminum as an adjuvant has been around since the 1920s. And when you read any books or articles about aluminum as an adjuvant, one of the things they still say is, we don't have any idea how it works. So we're injecting almost 12,000 micrograms into babies, and we don't have any idea what we're doing. We don't have any idea how it works.
Well, see no evil, right? I mean,
Exactly.
if we don't study it, we don't have to tell you that we're poisoning you and causing autism with it.
Well, they have studied it and they still don't understand it.
Yeah.
There's lots and lots written about it. And they said, we don't, there's a couple of theories called the depot theory that's supposed to keep the adjuvant or the antigen in the area a little bit longer. It's supposed to increase inflammation, which increases more of an antibody response. It's not supposed to migrate into all other organs, which of course we know it does. And so they're like, well, it's been around for a long time. And so it's generally recommended as safe, and it's the only adjuvant we have. So we don't know how it works, but we'll just keep using it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they do love their aluminum, which, I mean, who doesn't want a nice shot of aluminum in them every day? But they put it everywhere, right? So, I mean, here's the thing, Sherri, I'm curious what you think about this and this kind of conspiracy theory. I mean, we can't prove this. You and I don't have access to BARDA or DARPA documents. But I mean, we know darn well that they were working on all sorts of poisons for a lot of years, and aluminum's been out there forever. They've got it in your deodorant. They've got it in, just day-to-day products, topicals, all sorts of. I mean, aluminum is in everything, and it seems to be a very, very, very unhealthy product. I mean, there are OSHA standards for exposure and things like that. If I'm not mistaken, I believe they've got one for aluminum. I'm not 100%, but it's well known that too much aluminum exposure is not safe, and we don't know exactly how much or how it works or why, but we know there's an issue. I mean, it, it, it's hard to argue that they don't know that this is an issue. I mean, did you agree?
Yeah, and that's why I spend quite a bit of little time talking about that in the book. I talk about the other adjuvants, the ASO system, which includes one of its ASO was put together by GlaxoSmithKline, and there's 4 different ASO adjuvants, ASO 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they've taken one of them off the market. They've rolled a second one into, so they combine them together, and that they in that inside of those adjuvants they have toxic the cell wall of a toxic bacteria, and they actually use bark from a tree. And so, who was the smart person somewhere along the line that decided that that was a good thing to do to inject tree bark into people? And then
Yeah.
they've got adjuvants called or called MF59, which is against squalene, and it causes Guillain-Barré and all the animals they tested it in. And so I go into a lot of detail about that. But what's really important about the book, Tom, that I talk about the cell lines, the aborted fetal cell lines, the other types of cells that they use to manufacture vaccines, like cells from Chinese hamster ovaries. That sounds like a good thing to inject into people.
Who
And
doesn't want
cells from
that?
dog kidney cells. That sounds like a good thing. And cells from the army worm, the spring army worm. And so we've got insects in there.
Well,
But
who
the
doesn't
thing that
want
I
that?
really talk about, and I spend a lot of time talking about, that we in the health freedom movement really don't talk about, and it's one of the sections in the book I spend a lot of time on, is the Healthy People programs that started in 1980. And the Healthy People programs was the Surgeon General that was in charge in 1980 decided that he wanted to set a 10-year goal, of how to make America more healthy. And and they did this by decades. So the Healthy People program of 1980, that was written in 1980, they actually called it Healthy People 1990. And there were 6 goals, which, were okay goals. They were things like, wearing for safety, like wearing seatbelts and helmets when you're riding a motorcycle, and decrease smoking and increase sleep and increase exercise. And, these are kind of laudable goals. And remember, when they was written back in 1980, we didn't have the computer technology like we have now. They
No.
had to be typed out on a typewriter and mailed to people and to be able to get this consensus. But the nefarious part of that, Tom, is that, we had 6 goals to begin with. And now what we have are 45 focus areas and more than 1,200 1,200 goals that they go and they snoop into your back pocket about. They want to know, do you own a gun? Do you feel safe in your house? What kind of neighborhood do you live in? There are all
Yeah.
these different things, and what that whole 12 Healthy People program did, that started in 1980. The most recent one is Healthy People 2030, is it opened the door and laid the background for the Patriot Act, for setting up TSA and retinal IDs and the Real ID. The Model State Emergency Health Powers Act of 2001 is what led to where we are now in terms of broad surveillance and property management and quarantines. And in 2005, when they actually passed the PrEP Act, which I know you know a lot about, a lot of our audience knows at least some about. I spent a lot of time talking about that. One of the things that I found that I didn't know when I was investigating the PrEP Act and was two parts. One is that Senator Ted Kennedy had introduced legislation twice to try to get it at least modified, if not repealed. And unfortunately, he died in 2009 before he could carry that forward. And the other thing is the Countermeasure Injury Compensation Program. Now, for the last 25 years, my life has been consumed with vaccine information. The only time I'm not reading about it, writing about it, talking about it is really when I'm asleep. And to really dig into the Countermeasure Injury Compensation Program, I really didn't know much about it. And Suzanne Humphreys, who wrote the foreword to the book, she and I've talked about it several times. She said, I didn't even know about that. So the takeaway from that, from the CICP program, that's not funded, that doesn't have an injury compensation table, that very few people know about. It's got egregious sort of short timelines in terms to file. It doesn't cover hardly anything. And we've got 1.6 million people that filed VAERS reports that are going to get thrown underneath the bus. The thing about that is that if Suzanne and I didn't know much about it, and we're kind of like the two vaccine queens that write and do all these things about it, the general public doesn't know anything about it.
No.
And so I wrote a bit, there's a chapter in the book called Sacrifice for the Greater Good that really digs into all of those different things. And as of just a few days ago, as of April 1st, that the injury compensation program has only compensated 30 people, 30. Yeah. And there's two of them, because they say, well, we paid out millions of dollars. Well, there's one person that got a $2.3 million. Mm-hmm. The second highest compensation was $370,000. And if you take those two high payouts off the table as outliers on the claims and you average 28 people, the average payout is just a little over $4,000. Yeah. So these are people whose lives have been completely ruined, completely trashed. They've paid no compensation for any deaths on the table. They don't really have anybody who's actually monitoring the program. The people that I've interviewed that for the book that talked about the program said that, once you submit this big stack of records, it just gets set on a table somewhere and nobody even really looks at it. So the chapter on Sacrifice for the Greater Good and the area where I go into all the stuff about the PrEP Act and a big deep dive into Medicare and Social Security and electronic medical records of how our healthcare became weaponized. And
these hold on before we get
wait. And people like you and I who do this stuff know about it, but the general public doesn't.
They don't.
That's why I compiled it all into this book on zero accountability, so you got it all in one place.
But that's by design. But I'll tell you what, as I listen to you go through all of that, and there's a lot there, and there's a million different things we got to talk about on this. But one of the things that's very profound to me that I don't think people understand is nothing you're saying should be a surprise to anyone. Because if we look at public health as a field, public health is good when it's about education, right? If you want to educate people about being healthy, it's a profound thing. But long time ago, people realized that you could use the concept of fear to create a very powerful system by calling it public health. And public health is akin to communism. And let me explain what I mean by that, and I want your reaction, because I don't think we've ever talked about it this way. So public health means if it's about education, is fine. But public health as it is, and when you can legislate or regulate based on public health, you're always regulating or legislating for the collective versus the rights of the individual, right? Because it's public health. You're always putting the rights of the public or the greater good, air quotes, over the needs or the rights of the individuals. That's the nature of public health. It really is a manifestation of communism, right? For the greater good, for the good of the many, right? And it's truly, truly counter to our Constitution when you can regulate for public health. Now, nobody's going to say they're against having someone, having a requirement that someone washes their hands before they go back into the kitchen and cook in a restaurant. The problem is that we have, as we have everywhere else, a slippery slope argument. What is acceptable for public health regulation and what's not? And unfortunately, because constitutionally there's real clear limitations that don't exist. I mean, they're just not there. Nobody considered this back in the day. What's happened is the concept of public health has been weaponized. It's been turned into a fear machine, and it's now used as a cudgel to essentially promote, I guess, policies that I don't know how else to explain, for the greater good. Now, the worst part is if it stopped there with limiting our rights, just kind of this quasi-communist approach to regulating, that would be one thing. But as is always the case with anything that's even coming close to communism, it goes from regulating and pushing for the greater good in a legitimate way to pushing for a greater good for those in power. And public health now is not even about keeping healthy. It's about enriching the richest. It's about controlling the poorest. It's about eliminating. I mean, and we see this because if they were interested in actual public health, the hospital protocols wouldn't have been designed to kill people. If they were interested in public health, they wouldn't have made children mask and stay at home when it was devastating to their mental and psychological development. If they were interested in public health, they wouldn't require vaccines that have absolutely no positive impact at all, but do carry a huge risk. This is public health as a field, when given power to regulate or control, is communism, and is just like every other form of communism, where absolute power leads to absolute corruption. Do you agree?
100%. That's why I wrote an entire chapter in the book on zero accountability, an entire chapter on the book on how public health became weaponized.
Yeah.
Because that, and I start with historical, because anybody who's ever followed any of my stuff and read the other books that I've written or read all the Substacks, they know that I start my argument, my defensive of the argument, from a historical backdrop. So I go backwards in time because I really truly believe if we don't learn the lessons of history, we're going to repeat them. And if we don't know how we got here, if we just assume that COVID was the launching pad, then we don't understand where this all came from. And public health actually really did important things back in the mid 1800s.
Oh, it was necessary. We had to educate.
With typhoid and cholera and chlorination of the water that needs to be, now that we're getting fluoride out of the water, the next thing we need to do is cut back to minimize the chlorine in the water. Yeah. But back in the late 1800s, there was a 20-year period of time that more than 1,000 people a day were getting off of ships in New York Harbor that were immigrating from other countries. And they stayed in squalor type conditions. New York City at the time, there was a public health report that I found from, I believe it was 1890, that talked about how many tons of animal wastage and dead animals and dead horses and dead donkeys and dead pigs and dead cows that they had scooped up off of the roadways in New York City. And people lived in these dark, dingy tenement houses and ate poorly. And so, and then when outbreaks of typhoid would come, or outbreaks of cholera, they didn't have antibiotics to treat them like we have now. And people would literally die within 24 hours. So the public health at that time was very small, and they had a small set of public health doctors trying to manage all of this stuff. And they did the best they could, and they did a pretty darn good job. And it was in the 1940s when they started adding some chlorination to the water. And I talk about the original chlorination plan and how it all blew up and they did it poorly and they had to restructure it. And so, the book has a lot of historical backdrops. And that chapter on weaponization of the public health makes a really big deal about the fact that was important. And even before that, in the 1700s, when they set up the marine hospital system along the coastline and they were trying to prevent yellow fever from coming into the country. And they actually charged sailors, because at the time, our army was really tiny small, but we had a big set of sailing ships that protected the borders. And they actually charged the sailors 10 cents a month for their insurance inside of the inside of the marine hospital system. So it really was paid for health insurance that started back in the late 1700s. So I bring in that chapter about how public health became weaponized. We start from that perspective and then roll forward into the nefarious, awful stuff of the way it is now.
Yeah. Well, it's been an evolution. I mean, it's a slow evolution, and no one can deny that public health as a concept is good. It's the way that it's implemented, and it's the lack of recognition that it is inherently about collectivism. And because it's about collectivism, it always will move towards communism. And where there's no oversight or where regulation is allowed to be, just unaccountable, as you said, it will continue to move towards that. And anywhere that absolute power is kind of accumulated, it becomes absolutely corrupt. And that's really what's happened. And I think part of the things that I probably ought to spend a little time on, maybe we ought to do, is start drawing the parallels for people between public health and communism, because they are so similar. I think that would probably be a very useful thing, and your book's a good opportunity to start talking about that. But at the end of the day, though, I mean, when we look at this, the evidence is there, right? So when I say that the public health system has turned into something akin to communism, you see, first of all, that there's no limits to the power. And if you doubt me, just think back to what they did to you in COVID. I mean, did anybody in this country ever think that someone could force you to put a mask over your face or walk a certain direction down an aisle of a grocery store? I mean, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How did we get to that point in this? We got a country where our founding fathers had a Boston Tea Party over a tea tax of, like, I don't know, a few percent. And you compare that to where we are now, where we get a bunch of sheep that are willing to walk the same way down a grocery store aisle because they're stupid. It's not because there was any good reason. They're just stupid. So, I mean, when we look at this, it's incredible. But so the power has been concentrated. There's no question. I can show you that the power has been concentrated. Then we move to the corruption that you and I know too well, right? The revolving door between the FDA and Big Pharma, the revolving door between the FDA, Big Ag, and the Big Ag companies, the food companies, and the USDA. It's all the way through HHS. You've had this completely corrupt, just abuse of power of the public health system, for the greater good. I mean, even going back to, no, fats are going to kill you. All fats are terrible, but sugar is great. So go ahead and eat as much processed sugar as you want. Have a Snickers bar. Even that, the food pyramid, which is a joke. All these different things. Everywhere we see that corruption that occurs wherever you have too much power. Did you look into that at all in the book? I mean, I know you look and know about it, but I mean, just curious about your thoughts.
It just sort of, it lends itself to see that. I don't say directly corruption, but when you're talking about surveillance and tracking and mandatory vaccination and weaponization of public health, it leads itself to that. I don't directly compare public health to communism in the book. I don't do that. But
this is my new creative idea. I like it though.
So, but what I do talk about is the weaponization of fear, and where that actually started really was pretty much, it started way back, but where I start talking about it in the book is in 1976 with the swine flu epidemic.
Yeah.
when they tried to get everybody, the whole country vaccinated with swine flu in 1976. And the difference between that and COVID is that in that pandemic, um, after 6 weeks, they had 50 deaths and about 150 cases of Guillain-Barré, and they publicly pulled the program and compensated people for their injuries.
Yeah.
Now, roll that forward and compare that to COVID. We have 28 million deaths, 2.1 billion people on estimates globally that have been injured by this shot. And we have no compensation program. The countermeasure injury compensation program is a joke.
At best.
It doesn't even exist. It's not
Yeah.
really non-existent. And we are still saying we got to give COVID shots to pregnant women and 6-month-old babies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I heard McCary, Secretary McCary, who's the head of the FDA. I read a thing, you see, a couple of days ago,
Yeah.
excuse me, where he said that, the COVID jabs are still operating under an EUA, under emergency use, and that he was not going to improve them unless he could see data to prove things. Well, that's kind of a crafty political public speak, because first of all, the pharmaceutical industry can't prove anything. And but the other side of that is there is so much damning evidence out there. Things that you've written, you've talked about, I've talked about, Naomi Wolf, she's talked about, Peter McCullough's talked about it. There's enormous body of damage that should be used as evidence. When I saw Naomi Wolf's book, the Pfizer paper, when I first got a copy of it, I thought, you could walk into court and walk up to the judge, hand him the book and say, I rest my case, Your Honor. All the evidence is there. And so I feel like it's a little bit to the public, who there is still unbelievably a large swatch of the public who still believes that the COVID shots didn't harm anybody and nobody died from that. So I think that he's very craftily constructed a message saying you pharmaceutical industry have to prove it, which we know that they can't.
Well, and I agree with you. And I mean, listen, that's what Bobby's doing across the board, right? He's just going to science. And that was a brilliant strategy. And he's been very clear that that's what he's doing from the beginning. He didn't come in and say, I'm anti-vax. He said, I'm pro-science. And one of the reasons that I get, that I'll bust Pam Bondi's chops, but not Bobby's, because, Bobby's still got things going on that I would like to see stopped. I mean, they're still fast-tracking the Arctis saRNA poison. They're doing all sorts of things, and it's just stupid. There's no reason for that to be happening. But Bobby, I can give the benefit of the doubt on, because Bobby is doing things that are very, very measurable. He is talking about the right stuff. And I understand that Bobby's, his hands are cuffed a bit. I mean, that's just the way that it is. He can't just come in there and blow this whole thing up. He's got to provide the evidence. He's got to provide the data. He's got to educate the public. And in this case, Bobby doesn't need to educate you and I. Our team, our people, we've already educated. People watching this show, we already know it's poison. We already know it's death. But he's got to educate the millions of other people who've been lied to by the nightly news and the big pharma complex over the last God knows how long, so that they understand that this isn't a radical anti-vax thing. What it is a radical realization that the vaccines across the board, especially these COVID vaccines, are actually poisons. They're killing people, creating infertility. They're creating long-term health, chronic disease, all sorts of other issues, and just death, outright death. But plus the cancer explosion that you and I both know has occurred 100% due to the mRNA poisons, which, now we find out that Pfizer not only has SV40 in it, but they have SV40 promoters, which couldn't be in there by accident. They had to be put in intentionally, which means there is a legitimate argument to be made that Pfizer wanted to cause the cancer explosion, which isn't a surprise in light of the fact that they have potentially trillions of dollars coming in off of their mRNA cure for cancer that isn't out yet, but that everybody knows they're working on. So, I mean, this whole thing seems like a pretty shady circular scheme if I'm not missing anything.
Yeah, it's, I've actually tracked over the years the development of the vaccine and what it causes in terms of side effects. And then the same company like Aventis or AstraZeneca that creates the vaccine that causes the cancer is the same company that produces the chemotherapeutic agent to treat that cancer that they cause with the vaccine. So
Yes.
that's been going on since, well, since the polio vaccines for sure,
Yeah.
and probably before that. So, so the sacrifice for the greater good is really important. I also talk about, weaponization, so tracking, surveillance, and the global vaccine agenda. And that's
Real
another.
ID. Welcome, Real ID. Track and trace. Speaking of track and trace.
I don't talk about real ID in the book, but it's
Oh,
a but it's a it's but it is a huge big problem, and
yeah.
it's going
Well,
to.
no, but it ties in because you're right about it. The EMRs were 100% about track and trace. They were 100% about control and eventually to lead to a vaccine passport. But I'm just the real ID thing that's coming in is just another track and trace. It's going to add to that whole picture. And I understand you wouldn't have been able to put that in the book because it was they didn't make the announcement when you were writing it. But I mean, it's certainly another piece of this. But yeah.
Well,
So
I
what
don't.
did you get into?
Well, one of the things I talk about is the global vaccination agenda that nobody, I think, in our circles really talks about that on a really grand scale. And all the things behind Gavi and BARDA and, and all of the purchasing orders and all these other things. And I just lay them out bare. But you're right about the real ID. It's like, I've been, really fighting that for months now with Twyla Braze and her, Citizens Council for Health Freedom.
Yeah.
And we just, first of all, I think the big push to get it stalled started too late, and it
Yeah.
didn't have nearly enough of elevation behind it to
No.
really make a difference. And then when Christy Nome came on and made her little videos that she lied, flat out lied to the general public about, and then people just, yeah, sheep just all get in line, just like the people that go through TSA and put their hands up, every time to go through that little vibratory thing, and they don't know that they can opt out of the facial recognition stuff. I mean, there's just an awful lot of things that Tom, I know that you share the same frustrations that I do. That sometimes I think that we really are really trying to save a small remnant of people in our society, because there are so many other people that are lazy. They don't really want to take action. They don't want to defend themselves. They don't want to support your mission and all the stuff you're doing, my mission, all the stuff that I'm doing, and it's just kind of go along to get along.
Yeah.
And it's really going to be really detrimental to our country. This real idea is like having, the UN in your pocketbook. And first it's just going to be very innocuous. You just have this thing, it's got a little star on it, and it's just a different form of a driver's license. But what's going to happen with that is you're going to have to show that particular ID to vote. You're going to show that particular ID perhaps to get health care. Then are they going to have to show that ID to be able to get groceries and to get and go into your bank account and all the things that will just be the gradual takeover of our country? And I do talk about that a bit in the global vaccination agendas.
Well, and that's precisely what this is. It's an instrumental takeover. It's an instrumental expansion of the already vast power that public health has. And, you know, I guess there is some good news though, right? So one of the number one tools that they used against us during COVID was they lied to us and they used fear, right? And we know because, even in that first case that I filed, and you and I talked about this back then, we talked about the fact that if you run a Google Scholar search and you look at public health and fear, the use of fear within public health to motivate people to do whatever it is that they want you to do is not just a thing, it's a studied thing. They actually have spent immense amount of time and money studying how precisely to scare people into action, which is always a lie. I mean, they lie, they manipulate. That's what it is. But it works, and it works incredibly well, and people fall for it every time. So the use of fear in public health was the foundational driver for COVID. Everything in COVID was based, you're going to die, you're going to kill grandma, you're going to kill your kids, you're going to kill everybody. The good news about it, though, is we had some major wins from COVID. One of them was that by exposing the fact that this was always a lie and they always knew it, now people are not so willing to just, oh, I'm afraid, and follow orders, right? People are questioning. Now, not everybody, and there's a lot of sheep still out there, but we now have millions of people who are awake and who are not willing to kind of fall into that fear narrative. I mean, it's you could see it when they tried with the monkeypox and when they tried with the bird flu and they tried this, and people are like, "Hell will freeze over before I put a mask on again. Try it." I mean, people were very outspoken. So I think that that's a huge win for us. I think we've been very successful in that. And I'm kind of curious what you think, because I feel like that, of the various places that I find that I feel some hope, that's one of the biggest, I think.
Well, it's really true that they've really learned, when I talk about in the book, when I talk about the past pandemics, I make a big case that each one of those pandemics was a market test. They put it up there. They weaponize fear. That, oh, it's going to be the worst ever. A third of the population is going to die. Blah blah blah. And then when people like, excuse me, people like you and me and other, mainstream or mainline, alternative media people start saying, wait a minute, and they get a blowback, then they stop and it goes away. I
Yeah.
mean, it just stops. You don't hear about bird flu. You don't hear about, swine flu. Don't hear about COVID. And
Yeah.
it's during that time, in that silence, that they're crunching the data. They're
Yep.
looking at what worked, what didn't work. What do we need to do more of the next time? What do we need to drop? Like in COVID, we probably don't need to try to coerce people with dangling a carrot out there of a free college education
Yeah.
or, free
Free
beer for
donuts.
your free donuts and all that stuff. That probably didn't work. We tried that didn't work. So they're crunching the data to see, and you can see each one. If when you start from 2005, which is kind of the premise of the book, even though there's a lot more historical backdrop in there, when they started with bird flu in 2005 and then did the PrEP Act in 2005. And then, actually, it started a little bit before that with 9/11, with the smallpox scare. Like, oh my gosh, 9/11.
Yeah.
How many people were just terrified,
All right.
terrified, terrified? I'll never forget the day of 9/11 when I walked into my office and saw my physician assistant and my medical assistant standing there literally shaking and crying hysterically, and I've got to get home and hug my kids. It was like, what's wrong with you? Can't you see they finally pulled it off? What's wrong with
Yeah.
you? And so that was the country for a couple years, and some people that are still like that. So in
Yeah.
2001 they did that. In 2005 they did the bird flu. Then 2007 they did swine flu again, and then all of those were market tests to
Yep.
lead up to COVID. Now guess what? COVID was a market test too. Because
Absolutely.
not only were they able to implement all of these security measures after smallpox. I mean, we're still doing take off your shoes and take off your clothes and stand in front of this scanning thing since 24 years later. We've been trained well, and they're still using it, right?
Yeah.
So they've got this whole thing from weaponization that started there, probably before that. But in the book, I really make a point of starting there. And then what they did with weaponizing bird flu and the PrEP Act and all the surveillance things and the different things that they've rolled in. Of COVID, they have done the same thing. They've made more surveillance, more identifications, more lockdown. I mean, who would have ever thought, Tom, in our lifetime, that you would have to use a specialized United Nation branded driver's license or
Yeah.
a passport to go from Ohio to Indiana?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or to
It's
get
insane.
on an airplane in Cleveland and fly to Miami. Within our
Yeah.
own country, we're having to show a passport or a specialized ID.
It's
I mean,
literally
they have
insane.
taken it so far. It's really, really detrimental. And that's why in chapter 19 of the book, it's called the Activist Playbook. It's called the Activist Playbook. So it's
Yeah.
like I summarize all this nefarious, ugly stuff. All the things that they've done with Medicare, all the things that they've done with electronic medical records, all that stuff is all in the book. But when you get to chapter 19, it's called the Activist Playbook. Um, it's like tying it all together, the Activist Playbook. So it gives people very specific things that you can do to about the fear-based stuff, about your children, about vaccine passports, about the real ID, the identification stuff, the retinal scans, all these different things that they are putting in place. And we have to get everybody involved with the Activist Playbook of what. So it ends in the book ends up in an upbeat sort of feeling that there is something that you can do to fight back.
Yeah, well, and we need that, and there is. I mean, the fight's not over, and we haven't lost. And in fact, if you go back, one of the things that I'm most proud of personally is if you go back to 2020, when and that's when I started fighting, right? I mean, you've been doing this for forever. I didn't start till 2020. And that's when I was starting to be red pilled. And by the way, for everybody that doesn't know, you're looking at the lady who did a lot of red pilling for me. There were, in fact, when I first met Sherri, I had no idea that she was a world known big shot, this, that, and the other. I had no idea how big of an expert she was. And when she started talking to me about vaccines being poison, I initially thought, well, she's brilliant about this COVID stuff, but I'm not so sure that maybe she just does off her rocker a little bit on the vaccine stuff. But the more I studied what she was saying and the more I looked at it, the more I found out that Sherri's right should probably be trending as much as Alex Jones was right. And it's a thing. It's really a real thing. And so, when we went through all this, though, when I started in 2020, everybody's eyes were closed. And one of the things that I feel that we were most successful in is waking people up and helping them to see what's going on and helping them to understand, where things are and what's happening and how it's happening. And really getting people to start questioning the narrative. Now, we succeeded in shutting down lockdowns. We succeeded in shutting down vax mandates and over time. We got Fauci out of there. We did a lot of things, but the process was slow and painful, and it took a lot, and we're still got a long ways to go, but we had a lot of success. At the same time, we had the stolen election, and that was a total failure. The fight back on the 2020 election was a total failure. The fight back on J6 was a total failure. Both of those are only going to get corrected now because Trump's there. But neither of those got anywhere. But I personally think, and I'm curious what you think about this, Sherri, because this was one of my intentions. I mean, because I was asked to get in and start litigating on J6 and on the election steal. And I looked at both of them, and by the time they'd asked me to do that, it was so messed up, I felt like there was nothing I could do. And so I told people, I said, hey, you know what we got to do? I got to prove to the public and I got to prove to everybody that we're right on COVID. Then people will see that, yeah, the government's a bunch of liars and there's a bunch of crooks. And, maybe they were lying about the other stuff too. And so that was always part of my strategy. But I think I felt real good about that. And I think that our fight on COVID really is part of the reason that we have a Donald Trump back in office and that we were able to get so many people ready to fight. What do you think about that?
I agree. It's true. The even though he still doesn't come out and say we got to stop this,
We're hoping.
we're hoping that he will. And the first day after being inaugurated, he brings in Larry Ellison and talks about expanding the whole AI, all the stuff that was just really kind of like, I think all of America went, what the heck is that? Why is he doing that?
Yeah.
And so, I'm hopeful. Rome wasn't lost or won in a day. And major battles don't happen in just a few days. And I have to keep reminding myself that, I think it was yesterday or the day before was Trump's 100th day in office. So that actually means Bobby's been there probably around 60 days. And Makari's been there probably less than 30 days. And Jay Bhattacharya has been there about 30 days. And so they have made monumental moves forward in a short period of time. And anybody that's ever spent any time in government or worked with government knows that, Bobby's standing up there, he's got a whole bunch of the people he's talking to supporting him. He's got equally as number of people behind his back trying to kill him.
Oh, he does.
Shut it down and all, figuratively and probably literally too. But it's like, so for them to make as many big ovations going forward as they have in less than 2 months, we have to hang on to the hope of, they got a couple of more years yet.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll be able to make some progress. Now, my biggest concern, and as a lawyer, I'm sure you would agree with this, Tom, is that some of these colossal changes, like getting rid of all the colored dyes in foods and,
Yeah.
the different, doing this whole research on vaccines and autism. Bobby just posted a thing today saying that all vaccine trials going forward must be done with a true placebo, a
Yeah, I
true.
saw that.
So that's really important. But what needs to happen is that stuff needs to be codified into law, because
Yes.
it's not somehow codified into an absolute from here forward, this is the law that they have to.
Yeah.
Then as soon as Trump is gone, and maybe not the first generation, but the next generation, we're just going to be back to where we started from, and this is going to be a lot of activity and a lot of noise that's not going to go anywhere.
That's 100% accurate. I mean, right now, to be real honest with you, Trump's been a warrior. I see where Bobby's going, and that's good, and I'm happy with that. But at the end of the day, nothing they've done makes one bit of difference long term. It's good right now, but the second Trump's done 130, 140, I don't know how many executive orders, the day he gets out of office, that can be overturned.
100%.
It's really the deep state right now is waiting. That's part of the reason I'm always so hard on Bondi, because until we put the deep state in jail, until we actually break them, this will continue. It'll go right back to where it is. All they're doing is waiting it out, and we've got to get a DOJ that's willing to actually do something and has some gonads. And I mean, her standing out there on Fox News and telling me yippee yippee yippee, we put another vandal in jail for 20 years. I don't give a damn. I do not care. I am not impressed with her throwing the book at a Tesla keyer. Now, if she wants to stop the Tesla stuff, I'm all in favor of that. Go ahead, investigate Soros, and investigate the Open Society crew. Find out how Arabella is tied to this. Are they improving this? Are they pushing this? Are they working together to facilitate this? Go after that. You want to do, then I'll be impressed. But right now, we have no legislation being pushed and no accountability for the people behind this. And so right now what's happening is a whole lot of nothing. And
all those big press releases that Pam Bondi does, I mean, I look at it and I go, well, nice to see you're doing your job. Isn't this what you're supposed to be doing?
Oh, we arrested a gangbanger. Good. That's what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
But we're a little more than that, right? After 4 years of fighting and trying to get Trump in office, we want some actual action, not you telling me, hey, we arrested a gangbanger. Good. That's what you're supposed to do. How about Soros? How about Schumer? How about Gates? You tell me that, then I'm impressed, right? But or I don't know, maybe just some of the child rapists on the Epstein list, who are still being blackmailed and still sharing national security secrets and still being, I mean, these are big issues that nobody's bothering with because it's a little bit inconvenient. But I mean, like I said, Donald Trump's he's a machine. And I do agree with you. I think Bobby's doing a great job on some of this. And I think, Bobby it was very clear. If you actually watch what Bobby's doing, a lot of people were mad that he didn't day one, jump up and down, do all these different things. But if you watch what Bobby's doing, and I know for a fact, and I'm going to say this. So Bobby, I mean, the story is he went in and tried to get some data from Medicare, Medicaid, and they told him he couldn't have it. They work for him. Can you imagine the brazen, just the audacity of these crooked bureaucrats to have your boss, the Secretary of HHS, come in and say, I want data because I know that these products are unsafe and ineffective. And they say, no. What? I mean, good God, I would have fired everybody. I'd have said, okay, everybody's gone here. Whoever gives me the data first still has a job. Everybody else is going to be gone. I mean, it just, but this is an incredible, incredible thing. And we're going to have Congress codify, and we're going to have the DOJ put some people in jail, or none of this is going to change one bit.
There's a comment up here that RFK is controlled opposition. I would have to totally disagree with that.
I don't agree with that either.
People, I've known him for 20 years. I've had dinner with him. We've spoken on the same stages. We've run in sort of the same circles. Politics is about strategy, and sometimes you're
it's dirty.
And sometimes you're good at it, and sometimes you're not. And you have, it's really literally two steps forward, one step back. And you have to, each step that you take, you have to be very careful where you are setting that foot, or you're going to blow your whole leg off with a bunch of landmines. So I do not agree with that at all.
Well,
I
I'll tell
really
you what I
don't
think.
at all. Do you, and I
Well,
Tom, you feel the same way?
yeah, I don't. Bobby's not controlled opposition. No, but what I will say about that is, I think that the reason that people get that way, and the reason it's easy to believe things like that, is because politics suck. And I'm going
Totally.
to tell you, I've talked to Bobby enough that Bobby is a. I mean, listen, he grew up in the Kennedy family, and he is a true heir to the Kennedy legacy, in my opinion. If that family was as close to American royalty as we get, he's a true heir to that. He's a really classy guy. He's an interesting individual, and I like Bobby. So I don't think he's at all that. But I will say, for the general public, uh, politics are very distasteful, right?
Very much so.
For me and for most people, I just want, just tell me the damn truth, right? Just tell me the truth. Well, I can't tell you the truth today. What I can do is work to get you the truth. That's politics. And because of that, because you can't just come out, Bobby can't come out and say, hey, all vaccines are garbage, because he has to come out with proof on that, or he's going to get, now he knows it. Of course he knows it. He's been fighting it for how many years? Of course he knows, but he's got to get his evidence lined up. And that's politics, right? Your hands are tied until you can do something. But there's kind of this disconnect. And I don't know if you heard at the beginning, I was grumbling about the people who are, I mean, we've just passed this law in Florida with GWF, where we're seeing that this anti-chemtrail law, and it's a wonderful thing. It's a huge deal. I mean, Bobby's talking about it. It's now, chemtrails are mainstream now. People are awake and they're aware that this is a real thing. This is a huge deal. It's a huge success. People are grumbling because they're saying, well, it's not perfect. Well, no kidding. But that's politics. You don't get perfect. You don't get everything in your first shot. If you want to get to perfect, it's always incremental. And you have to win a battle before you can win the war. And then you have to win another battle before you can win the war. And what the key here is Bobby taking steps? And I always look for the evidence, right? If he were controlled opposition, he would never have said, I'm going to demand placebo trials. He would never have said that we're going to do some. I mean, the things he's doing across the board, moving towards science, moving towards real science. And one of the things that, even with Donald Trump, because people say Trump and his AI thing, well, listen, AI is an arms race, and it's the equivalent to the Cold War, right? We are back in the Cold War. AI will run this world, whether we like it or not. China's working on it. Russia's working on it. Everybody's working on it. And I don't like it, because I don't think that we can control AI, and I think it pushes us towards an apocalypse. But at the end of the day, if China runs it and they've got it, I guarantee you it's an apocalypse. So Donald Trump has no choice but to try and make sure that we get to the AI ruler, kingship, whatever. We're the best and brightest on it first, because whoever's first wins everything. And realistically, I don't think anybody wins with AI, because I think AI ends up destroying everything. But that said, it's an arms race. He has no choice but to embrace the AI universe. I mean, there is no option on that. I don't like it, but that's the reality of it. So when you see about the AI and the vaccine stuff, what I will say, though, is, remember, he also has said, I support Bobby Kennedy. I'm going to let Bobby get to where Bobby gets. And that's that. So yeah, they may want to put in AI in healthcare, and that'll be, actually, there's a lot of use for AI in healthcare if it's done honestly. I do think that it makes research quicker where it's honest. Of course, that's a trick, because most of the
Well, the thing is, with the research tools, with using it for research, you have to know enough to know when it's telling you the truth or not.
Yeah, because it lies.
There are times when I've used AI because I want a quick date or a quick fact.
Me too.
And it's just easier because it's faster than trying to sift through Google or PubMed or any of those things.
Yeah.
And so I would ask it a question like, what year did say Prevnar 7 come out?
Yeah.
And I looked and I go, that's not right.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, and then AI says, oh, I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right. Let me check again, which is really creepy.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I've caught it lying. I've been documenting for a while how it lies. I can show it lying. I can show it actually actively choosing to lie. It's an interesting thing. I don't trust AI at all. And you're right. You have to know the topic better than the AI or you can't use it.
Exactly. Or at least
But
have a fair enough idea that, wait a minute, that's not right.
but we've got guys like Mike Adams who are launching his own AI that should be a much more. I mean, eventually we'll get to where AI is going to be a useful tool on things if it's done right. I still think AI is going to take over the world and kill us all. But I mean, that's just me. And, it doesn't matter whether I think it or not, because there's nothing I can do to stop the AI revolution. That's happening. It's kind of like cryptocurrency. I don't, whether I like it or not, it's there and it ain't going away.
I think that the important part is all this chat over here in the chat about I don't trust anybody and I don't like this and I don't like that. Well, politics is messy. And, as bad as it is here, it's worse everywhere else in the world. And we've got to keep in the good fight to try to keep, we worked really hard to get, I mean, when you look at the map of the US and it's all red with a couple of blue dots after Trump got into office, we have to push really hard to keep them there and keep accountability there, keep writing on their back, not only just RFK and Trump, but every person in that cabinet. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because it's going to give you tools and bullets for your activist thing. So I'm going to show it one more time. It's
Yeah, please do. I love the book.
Zero Accountability in a Failed System. And you can buy it if you go to drtenpenny.com/0. That's all you need to do, drtenpenny.com/0, or you can get it from Amazon. And I really hope that if you get it from Amazon or you read it, I mean, it's going to take you a while. There's a lot there. If you like it, please go out and give us some good reviews.
Well, and I hope everybody does. And Sherri, I appreciate all the time. I know we went a little longer than I expected, but I get excited when I'm talking to you.
Okay,
and we got to come back and you know what? You and I got to do another one and talk about AI and some of these other things that are happening to transhumanism, because it's awful, it's evil, and we've got to make sure people are aware of it. So we'll do it again sometime soon. I appreciate you being with us. Everybody, make sure you're checking out Sherri's book, Zero Accountability. That's just look for that. You'll find everything. It's a wonderful thing. I love Sherri. We all love Sherri. Make sure you're sending her some love, support her. Check out TomRenz.com. Make sure you're checking out her courses, which are also wonderful. And I appreciate everybody watching. Sherri, thanks for being with us, and we will be back